And I want to say welcome to everyone to our presentation today. You are in the session called Activism in the Music Industry. This is an ISCORE Encore presentation. I first saw this presentation earlier this semester, and it was fantastic. And the connection with our theme for First Amendment Days was instant, in my opinion. So we are fortunate today to have with us ISU student Durga Sritharan and her mentor, Jasmine Tappin. My name is Julie Roosa. I'm the First Amendment specialist at the Greenlee School of Journalism and Communication. Today's event is part of our week-long First Amendment Days celebration. This is actually our 19th year of educating and celebrating the 5 freedoms of the First, which are the freedom of speech, press, petition, assembly, and religion. Our theme this year, as I mentioned, is Some Assembly Required, and we have a focus on protest. So when we think of the First Amendment and the power of protest, we may not immediately think of music, but today Durga will share why we should. After a presentation, we will have time for questions, so please share those in the chat or unmute your microphone when the time comes. We would appreciate it, though, in the meantime, if you would mute your microphones and keep your videos off for the first part of the presentation. Let me tell you just a little bit more about our guests today. Durga Sritharan is a sophomore at ISU, majoring in biology and pre-medicine. Among her many accomplishments, she is also a George Washington Carver Scholar, which brings us to her professional mentor, Jasmine Tappin, who is here with us as well. And Jasmine is the program coordinator for the George Washington Carver Program, among her other accomplishments as well. So now let me turn it over to our special guests.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julie, for that introduction for me and Durga. Hello, everyone joining us today. Durga, I'll pull up the presentation and you want to just dive on in?
Sounds good. All right, so hello everyone. Welcome to the 4th day of First Amendment Days. My name is Durga Sritharan, and I will be presenting on activism in the music industry, helping to overcome racial injustices alongside my professional mentor for this project, Ms. Jasmine Tappin. Before we begin, I would like to extend my gratitude towards Jasmine for guiding me throughout the process of applying to and presenting at the Iowa State Conference on Race and Ethnicity, also known as ISCORE, and Julie Roosa for attending our session at ISCORE and inviting us to present at such an impactful event. So here is our agenda for today's presentation. First, I would like to go more in depth with some introductions of myself and Jasmine, so you can all get to know us a little more prior to digging deeper into the content of this presentation. Next, we will discuss the class I took part of this last fall and how it inspired me to research this field and submit a proposal to present my research. After that, we will dive into the history of activism in the music industry, and then we will highlight modern day social issues and activism specifically within the music industry. Next, we will discuss the amplification followed by the importance and future of activism in the music industry, and end with a brief conclusion. After viewing this presentation, you are more than welcome to ask questions through the live Q&A session Jasmine and I will be holding. As for our learning outcomes, by viewing this presentation, you will learn about the history of and modern day activism in the music industry. Additionally, you will begin to understand the importance of activism in the music industry, appreciate its impact, and how this form of activism can be improved. So to start off, my name is Durga Sritharan, and I use she, her, and hers pronouns. I am currently a sophomore here at Iowa State University, majoring in biology on the pre-med track. I am also a George Washington Carver Scholar, and I presented a poster for University Studies 105 at the ISCORE in 2020 for the first time. I had so much fun last year, so I wanted to submit a proposal for this year's conference and present again this year. Additionally, I am a peer mentor for the George Washington Carver Academy and Biology Education Success Team's learning community. I volunteer at Mary Greeley Medical Center and Youth in Shelter Services, and I am involved in the Iowa State Neurophysiology Lab and the Epsilon chapter of Alpha Sigma Kappa Women in Technical Studies. In my free time, I enjoy traveling, spending time with family and friends, and singing and playing instruments, which I will touch on later. As I previously mentioned, Jasmine Tappin is my professional mentor for this year's project, and I could not be more grateful to work with her and receive her guidance throughout this whole experience.
Thank you so much, Durga, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. As stated, my name is Jasmine Tappin. I go by she, her pronouns. I am the current GWC program coordinator, the program coordinator for the George Washington Carver Scholarship Program and Academy in the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs. I started my journey here at Iowa State in the summer of 2019, and it wasn't until fall 2019 where I really got to meet Durga and her cohort within the Carver Academy. I served as the instructor for not only our 105, University Studies 105 and 106 six courses, but I also served as the instructor for the University Studies 205 Carver Academy Leadership Seminar as well. In addition to my professional work, outside of that, I enjoy napping and yoga, as well as currently diving into the anime genre. So for any anime fans out there, definitely feel free to hit my chat and we can have more conversations about that. All right, so just for some context and a bit of background about the George Washington Carver Scholarship Program and Academy. So the GWC program is one of two scholarship programs and one of three programs currently housed in the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs. In the scholarship, we offer 100 four-year full tuition scholarships to incoming newly direct from high school students who identify as multicultural. In addition, they identify as high achieving students as well, so they must have a 3.5 or above to apply for the scholarship as well. And last but not least, this scholarship is open to students not only inside the state of Iowa, but outside of Iowa as well. So we get students from all over the country, from California to Texas to Maine, and so on and so forth. The mission of the program really is to enhance, encourage, and support scholars' academic, social, and cultural activities throughout their college experience. One large component of the program is that the Carver Academy curriculum encompasses academic success, identity development, career, community development, as well as leadership. Each of these core aspects of the curriculum can be found throughout the seminar courses within the Carver Academy. So our University Studies courses 105 and 106 really serve as transition courses for our first year students. In the fall, within the 105 course, we really focus on academic success, identity development, and connecting students to resources and campus partners. While the 106 course in the spring really focuses on the life and legacy of George Washington Carver. Lastly, we offer the University Studies 205 Leadership Seminar course, which we'll dive into a bit later in the presentation. But that course is really open to our second, third, and fourth year scholars to really focus in on leadership.
All right, so as Jasmine mentioned, one of the courses here at Iowa State is the University Studies 205, and this class is a seminar for George Washington Carver and Multicultural Vision Program scholars.
Yes, so to give a bit more context about this specific course, so the University Studies 205 Leadership Seminar really takes a deeper dive into the conversations around race and ethnicity that we typically have in the 105 course, but it's really centered around this idea of leadership. And so in the past year, as you all know, we've seen an increase in protests, rioting, and looting taking place in the aftermath of the murders of George Floyd, Sandra Bland, Elijah McClain, Daunte Wright, and countless others by the hands of the police. And so it really raised the question of what is activism? What does it look like and how do we define it? And so we really wanted to bring that conversation to our current scholars here at Iowa State. So in the summer of 2020, myself, alongside the former Multicultural Vision Program Coordinator, Wanje Kim, in support of as well as the support from the Assistant Dean of Students and Intercultural Initiatives and Resource Center, as well as the Director of Multicultural Student Affairs, Kenyatta Schamberger, We really worked on revamping this course to begin that conversation. So within the redesign, we opened up the course to the Multicultural Vision Program scholars as well, since they too were having conversations about race and ethnicity in their transition courses, as well as wanting to broaden the audience and broaden the perspective around this conversation. So the course objectives, we really want to, one, understand the idea of social justice and intersecting identities that play a role in our society. We want our students to discover leadership through the lens of actively bettering one's environment and being an agent of positive social change, as well as exploring issues that affect African American, Asian Pacific Islander, Desi American, Latinx, Latino, Latina Americans, Native American, and bicultural and multicultural individuals in higher education and beyond. And so within the course, we wanted our scholars to critically analyze how these social movements, modern day forms of activism, and how being an agent of social change is really playing out in today's society. So this led to creating the final project, which was the activism research and paper presentation. Our scholars had the opportunity to research a form of modern day activism and take a critical look at the history and development of how this form of activism is currently prevalent in today's society. So for the final project, we encourage our scholars to create a pecha kucha. And so for those unfamiliar, a pecha kucha is a storytelling format where a presenter shows 20 slides for 20 seconds of commentary, where each slide is solely composed of photographs. The topics range from peaceful activism, like nonviolence resistance and peace vigils, to economic activism, like brand activism and consumerism, and more. So when observing Durga's presentation last fall, I was really excited about the topic of activism in the music industry, and I was overly joyed when asked to support her in further developing her presentation for the ISCORE conference. Durga has truly exemplified what it means to be a GWC scholar, and I'm excited for you all to take in all that she has learned on this topic.
Thank you, Jasmine. So going a little deeper into the research project, when I was initially thinking of a topic for this project, I was stumped. And that was because I wanted it to be meaningful for myself, but also for my audience. And because of how Jasmine educated me about different social issues through the curricula for this class, I wanted to make sure that I left a long lasting impact on a unique and up and coming form of activism. Music is something I have been quite passionate about from a very young age. In terms of being involved with music, I have not only learned how to play numerous instruments and sing, but to also look for the messages one is attempting to convey through their art, whether it's through lyric analysis or a composition basis. With all that is going on in the world today, I have been finding that learning about social issues through music helps me understand our current state as a society. Many people tend to overlook music as a social platform to share one's voice and opinions on different issues, ranging from breakups to the hardships people face on the daily relating to their identity. Music has provided an opportunity for members of our society to express their voice without automatic rebuttal from those with opposing views. Due to this effect, activism in the music industry has continued to trend upwards nationally and even globally, especially in recent years. This has intrigued me, leading me to learn more about activism in the music industry and analyze different approaches from artists specializing in different genres and those popular in various eras. Amiri Baraka, writing as Leroy Jones in Blues People, looks into the African American experiences of the nation through music. In the book, Baraka explains that blues music acts as a response of African abductees to American enslavement. Work songs and spirituals represented the range and adaptation for foreign land that they were given no choice but to make into their new home. The genre continued to provide engagement and empowerment to get through the hardships people were facing at the time. Over time, many popular artists have utilized their musical talents to incorporate social issues that are still relevant today with blues. Douglas Henry Daniels, professor of history and Black studies at the University of California, Santa Barbara, wrote a journal article entitled The Significance of Blues for American History. In this article, Daniels claims blues is essential for transcending what seems to be the nation's limitations, specifically its unwillingness to include Blacks and colored peoples as equals in its political and social system. In terms of perspectives of blues artists themselves, Lonnie Johnson, a New Orleans blues guitarist who recorded with Louis Armstrong in the 1920s, talked about how early he had learned to express his innermost feelings through music and how he was able to acquire this tendency. Additionally, Jimmy Rushing, a blues singer and a member of the Basie Band, says, "Blues is a reflection of life, of things that happen to a person." Douglas then explains how personal involvement was essential in order for these artists to sing or play convincingly and to communicate their messages effectively. Both Baraka and Albert Murray, another historian and musician, tell the story of jazz to emphasize its birth out of the blues. For Baraka, one of the more coherent ways of defining jazz is as a synthesis of European instrumentation and the African-derived polyrhythms that fundamentally are the blues, even as jazz developed its own trajectory. Jonathan Claridad, a student from Santa Clara University, wrote an article, "Leaders and Players, the Role of Jazz Artists as Civil Rights Activists," encompassing the role of jazz artists in the civil rights movement. In this article, Claridad states, "The history of African American protest through artistic expression is important for contextualizing the specific calls to action of the 1960s that jazz artists made. Dating back to the days of slavery in the United States, music has been an incredibly important outlet of expression for African Americans." According to Santa Clara University professor Joshua Reed, enslaved Africans in 18th century New Orleans would congregate in Congo Square on Sundays, which was often called the birthplace of jazz, despite constant threat to sing, dance, and play music. A lot of the poetry, writing, and music produced in this era was very critical of and used to highlight how Americans had treated African Americans thus far. On September 15, 1963, a small Baptist church in Birmingham, Alabama was bombed by white supremacists, killing 4 innocent girls. This incident rocked the nation and led cultural icons like jazz musicians Nina Simone and John Coltrane to respond to the tragedy through music to help the country heal. Nina Simone, a musician and activist, wrote the song "I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free." Her piece emphasizes how impossible standard freedom is for African Americans and the lack of recognition of the injustice. Although it does not have an uplifting message, it does serve as a plea of awareness. Additionally, saxophonist John Coltrane's Alabama took a much more somber approach to dealing with the events of the Birmingham church bombings. In his piece, he called the people to reflect on the lives lost through a solely instrumental approach. On the other end of the spectrum, hip-hop, R&B, and pop culture have been becoming more prevalent in our time. Some of the biggest artists, including Beyoncé, Kendrick Lamar, and H.E.R, have been incorporating their voices and opinions on some of the most controversial issues, specifically racial injustices, into their music. More recently, these artists have taken the advantage of the opportunity to educate their audiences through music about the Black Lives Matter movement and police brutality. In the next few slides, we will discuss lyric analysis and how it can be used to identify a song's purpose. Lyric analysis methods are greatly used in various environments ranging from the choir room to music therapy settings. Through lyric and song analysis, it encourages people to evoke thoughts and feelings based on the music they listen to or perform. It shows people from a very young age to critically analyze each song to find the purpose of its creation and spark conversation amongst diverse audiences. In this presentation, we will look further into 3 songs: All Right, Freedom, and I Can't Breathe. The first song we will look into is All Right by American rapper Kendrick Lamar. This piece was released in 2015 and was associated with the Black Lives Matter movement after members of several youth-led protests were heard chanting the chorus, and some publications called All Right the unifying soundtrack of the movement. In an interview with NPR, Lamar stated, 400 years ago, as slaves, we prayed and sung joyful songs to keep our heads level-headed with what was going on. 400 years later, we still need that music to heal. And I think that All Right is definitely one of those records that makes you feel good no matter what the times are. The lyrics displayed here are from the pre-chorus. He begins by mentioning the history of Black oppression and then comes back to the present. Although things are different nowadays, Kendrick Lamar emphasizes that they aren't different enough and there must be more improvement as a society. In 2016, American singer Beyoncé collaborated with Kendrick Lamar to produce the song entitled Freedom, which was highlighting systemic racism and injustices dating all the way back to the times of slavery in the United States. Now, in this music video, they even feature the mothers of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, and Eric Garner, all whose sons were victims of police brutality. These lyrics presented on this slide are taken from the chorus of the song, where Beyoncé emphasizes liberation and specifically the liberation of Black women. Kendrick Lamar's verse emphasizes the interactions with police for Black men. And the overall message is a call to action to persevere and continue to educate to eliminate racial injustices for all, specifically African Americans. This last summer, H.E.R released a protest song entitled I Can't Breathe in response to recent police brutalities of unarmed African Americans. The phrase I Can't Breathe, which is the title of this piece, became more prominent throughout the development of the Black Lives Matter movement, as they have been used to reference the last words of Eric Garner, George Floyd, and at least 70 other victims of police brutality. In the third verse of the song, H.E.R transitions from her vocals to an assertive spoken word monologue and does not ask how we got here, but tells the audience instead. Through this, she cites America's history of oppression as the root of today's violence. In an interview, H.E.R discussed the situation in itself and song as being very painful yet very revealing. Songs like these are created to make people feel uncomfortable and spark conversations with others to be active. There are many platforms artists and their audiences use to amplify activism through music. For instance, people can use streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music to listen to different artists' music. And there have been social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter to spark awareness through trends using these songs. The ability to amplify activism through the arts will allow for various audiences to engage and educate others by sparking conversations many people look over just because they may be sensitive topics to discuss. However, these conversations must be had in order to create a change in our society. Additionally, these contributions can inspire audience members to fight for equality within their community, regardless of its size. In general, music provides a method for artists to speak their minds and spread awareness on issues they feel strongly about. Although activism in the music industry has come a long ways since it was first brought up, there are still significant flaws in this approach, which can very well be improved moving forward. There has been a continuous trend of artists of color releasing music to address various social issues, especially those regarding racial injustices. However, if more white artists contribute to this approach of spreading awareness of such controversial issues, a wider range of people will become more educated on these subjects and will be more likely to act upon them. Additionally, artists receive some profit every time their songs are played. Over time, with this said profit, they can donate to specific causes or organizations and encourage their audience and other artists to perform similar acts to raise awareness or embark on creating change. For example, We Are the World was written by Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson to generate donations for USA for Africa, which would then help feed and relieve starving people in Africa, specifically Ethiopia, for recovery after the 1983 to 85 famine. Following the earthquake in Haiti 25 years later, a remake of the song by another cast of singers was recorded. A similar approach can be utilized to aid the Black Lives Matter movement or families affected by police brutality. Also, having benefit concerts and using the proceeds from the event can aid organizations in bettering their tactics or approaches to make sure their voices are heard as well, and help those who are experiencing great hardships that many on the opposing view tend to overlook. Overall, activism in the music industry has provided an avenue for individuals and groups to express their voices without facing criticism from those with opposing views. History has shown how influential musicians can be in sparking conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Activism in the music industry has and continues to influence reformers to act upon social and racial injustices in today's society. In order to protect and serve for future generations, it is up to us to be proactive. Music provides a platform for individuals to do so and to be heard, to spark conversations that tend to be ignored, and build a better foundation and future for those to come. Once again, thank you for listening to my presentation. We will be around for the live Q&A, but if you are unable to stick around, you are more than welcome to contact us via email.
Thank you so much. Give me just a second here to get things how I want them to be. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show the participants now, and I would love to hear, especially from the students, if you have questions related to this very timely topic. So you can either share those questions in the chat, or you can even unmute yourselves. We'd love to see your faces and hear the questions as well. I'll ask the first question though, Durga, with everything happening, even in the last few days, and your topic being so powerful, how has it affected you having done this research and now having seen these things unfold all around you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like I'm a lot more hyper aware of the situations that are going on. And I know that these things can inspire artists to create music. So I'm definitely on the lookout to find more music and to share that with others. So if they don't really understand what's going on through the news, this might be a better alternative for them to kind of get a grasp on everything that's been going on recently.
And my follow-up to that might be also, in light of all the recent events, do you yourself have, music that you turn to sort of share your emotions and maybe find a sense of peace?
Yeah, so this kind of ties into having practiced instruments and learning how to sing. So sometimes if I have the time to sit down at a piano, then I'll look up some different songs, or even if I'm in the car, then I'll just blast the songs and try to sing to them as well. Um, and even though I can't do too much on my own, I know that at least it's giving me a sense of peace, and just knowing that I can do what I can in my power to educate others, it might make even the smallest of impacts for them too.
Very good. Let me open it up then to others. I know sometimes in Zoom, everybody, it can be tricky to know who's going to speak when. So one thing I do in my classes is I ask students to include a little icon next to their name if they are willing to be called on. So if you wish to do that, or like I said, we're pretty informal here. So if you just unmute yourselves and ask your question, I think that'll work just fine as well.
So during your presentation, you brought up the USA for Africa and how like they use that to help, like with the song, they use that to help raise money for it. Do you think people would assume that that money's not necessarily going to help? Like if we were to do it now for like the Black Lives Matter that you brought up, do you think people would assume that money is not going towards that movement?
That's a good question. It is kind of tricky though, because I feel like there will be at least one person out there that's thinking, "Oh yeah, like people are just taking money for themselves, or they only want to profit off of their music, basically." But genuinely, I believe if people have that in their hearts and they want to donate, then they definitely should. Um, I don't think something like this would or should be thought of as, I guess, a scam.
Okay.
I would like to hear just a little bit more about the George Washington Carver program, and if there are students who are in attendance here today, if they wanted to get involved or if they want to take the classes without being in the program. Is that a possibility, Jasmine?
Hi, Julie. Yes, so thank you for that question. So unfortunately, our courses are owned solely for our Carver scholars. So for folks who want to get involved and engage in conversations like the ones we've been having, I know there is like the Dialogues on Diversity course that is offered through Iowa State that students can enroll in, as well as some other opportunities as well. But we do solely keep our courses within the Carver Scholarship solely due to the identity that the students hold of being able to have open and honest conversations with each other, knowing that they all hold marginalized identities and are facing and encountering some of the issues that we talk about daily.
Okay, well, thank you. Clearly doing some impressive work in the program. Do you have a different theme each year in terms of some of these presentations that the students engage in?
Gotcha. It's a really great question. So we only just begun the revamp of 205. So last year was the first year we actually put it into practice. Definitely coming into this fall, we're definitely going to look at the curriculum we have, definitely structure it to current events, things that have happened in the past year, to keep these conversations relevant and to keep the students engaged and active in those discussions. So I think we can definitely work on tailoring it to specific like movements or specific areas or forms of activism, but definitely wanting to keep up with the times and making sure that our students are able to engage and interact in those discussions. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'll ask one more of Durga before I ask again for if the students or other participants want to ask a question. The having a project like this, what kind of impact did that have on you as a student in terms of your learning, especially as it compares to other classes that you take that maybe don't have this kind of focus?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm a biology major. So everything that like all the classes I've been a part of, mostly just science based. And I mean, even like racial issues occur in the medical field, especially with patient care, people refusing to receive care from doctors of color or identifying as others. Um, so being able to have this kind of safe space where I don't really have to worry about what I'm saying. I can just express how I feel. I know at least someone else is going to have something to say that relates to what I've said. I feel like when I talk to a lot of people in my other classes, there's kind of a barrier there, so they don't quite get it, and I obviously do not blame them. But there is some sense of divide. So having this course in the scholarship and just the community in general has really helped me with my transition to college.
Yes, just to follow up. Joelle Mitchell put a link in the chat for everyone to the Encore ISCORE project. I think for students who want to continue having conversations around race and ethnicity, want to continue pushing that needle and bringing about change, getting involved with that project, attending the ISCORE conference that happens annually on campus for students in the Iowa State community. I think those are also some areas that folks can get involved in.
Very good. Yes, excellent. I want to, before we reach the end of our time, I want to hear from Durga and maybe even the students. One thing that I was sharing earlier is that during the ISCORE presentation, some of the audience started to share their own best examples of protest songs and songs that they turn to for, like I said, for that sort of emotional connection. So if any of you in the chat want to share a song that you might recommend, or if you have music that you really want to sort of hold up as example of protest music, I would love to see that list grow. And Durga, if anything since you've done your project, if there has been any music or any songs in particular that you might point to, I'm going to sort of put you on the spot for a second.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, yeah, so I have come across a couple songs here and there. I think mainly now it's been broadened, I would say. So instead of specifically looking at songs relating to racial injustice, I have looked at songs about immigration. So one of my favorites is called American Oxygen by Rihanna. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of it, but it really dives deep into immigration and Rihanna's story of coming to the United States. And they also kind of tie the song into Empire State of Mind, which is by, I believe, Alicia Keys and Jay-Z, which is also a very good song. Additionally, one of my favorite bands is Nothing But Thieves, and they are a British rock band. Um, this band focuses more on the general aspects of politics, I would say, and kind of just general societal issues. So I would definitely recommend those. I am in the process of creating a Spotify playlist. So if anybody would like to look into that, once I make that public, I can link my Spotify in the chat.
Excellent. I think everybody always appreciates good recommendations for music. I don't know if who all is joining us, but I'm wondering if there are also any examples of maybe how shall we say, more seasoned songs that we might want to share with the younger people attending today. If anybody has any examples of classic music, or maybe Durga, you mentioned some in your presentation. If there are others though that we should not miss out on, especially during these perilous times, I would love to see those titles or have you unmute and share those suggestions as well.
Right off the top of my head, I don't think I can think of too many classics. The ones that come to mind really are mostly in the R&B and pop genres, kind of what I had expressed before. But I think it would be good practice for you guys out there to take the next step and start analyzing the stuff that you listen to. Maybe they might not correspond with, you know, racial issues or other social injustices, but then you'll have a better eye of what you're looking for. But I think it's incredibly important to understand what you might be singing or what you might be sharing with other people, to get a better idea of what their artist experiences are kind of like.
All right, excellent, excellent. I see a student in the chat, or a name in the chat, with a lot of really good suggestions, and I'm wondering if Aaron Hickman, if you would mind telling us kind of what your background is in music.
Sorry, my camera isn't working today, but
No problem.
I mean, I don't really have a background in music. I just really like music. So my dad is a drummer though, I guess. So from a very young age, I've just listened to a lot of music, and I listen to a lot of different genres. So I've come across all different kinds.
Well, I appreciate all your suggestions. I'm sort of furiously writing those down and saving them, not just yours, but everybody's. But I was just seeing your name in there, and so thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else have a final question here? It's 11:42, I see, and we want to be sure to allow students to get to their next classes or their next appointments. So any last questions, question from anybody before we sign off?
I don't really have a question. I have more of a historical perspective. Durga, I was really looking forward to your presentation, and I loved it. But also I wanted to kind of give you all the historical note of how this First Amendment celebration that we have at Iowa State every year actually started with music. It was a thing that the First Amendment Center and Ken Perkins started called Freedom Sings, which essentially talked about how all the music that really celebrated the First Amendment. So and Strange Fruit, I see in the chat, and was one of the songs that really started the discussions about First Amendment and music historically. So if you want to go back and Freedom Sings is a musical celebration of the First Amendment. It's a beautiful piece, and it's still, you can find it online, and it's really wonderful. So, and I loved your presentation, which kind of analyzed a lot of the things that started in that Freedom Sings, oh God, 25 years ago. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Spoon. That was a good plug for Freedom Sings, and maybe we'll see if we can find something on YouTube and add that to our First Amendment Days page for everybody to check out. That's a great suggestion. If there aren't any other questions, then I would like to pass along our sincere thanks and gratitude to both Durga and Jasmine for being here today, for really enlightening us on music as activism. It really does, as I said, tie in with our theme of some assembly required and the power of protest and sharing your opinions and your voice in whatever way that looks like for you. So appreciate it so much. We will try to collect these song suggestions as well and put those together on our page similarly. And I saw that Durga shared her what do you call it, handle in Spotify for people to follow. So thank you to you both again for your time, for your expertise, for sharing this with us today. And thank you to those who attended as well. I appreciate it. We'll see you at our ongoing First Amendment Days events happening throughout today and tomorrow as well. Thank you.
Thank you.